All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan, Stephen Teri Czinn, with gratitude to Hashem as they welcome their fifth grandchild, Gavriel Amichai Czinn, and loving memory of Dr. Zinn's mother, Doris Czinn, Devorah, Bas Rabbi Yisroel Yoel, on the occasion of our fourth yahrzeit. To thank Shaindy and Avraham Kelman from Yerushalayim Kodesh for dedicating the Sherman Shoshos this month in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Avram's father, Rephael Yechiel ben Avram, Mr. Jerome W. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, then the Shabbos will have an aliyah and the family's ein necham rabosai. With that, let us begin. Baruch Hashem, a lot to do today. Today's daf is Kuf Yud Gimel 113. Now we are picking up Emeretz Hashem on Kuf Yud Beis and Beis 112b. And we left off. I know I left off yesterday a little bit like mid sentence. We are picking up 2, 4, 6, 7 lines down from the bottom. Ihachi afilu katzatz nami. So this is just to give a moment of context. So remember again, the Gemara was talking about the idea, the concept in the Mishnah that a laborer, an employee, has the ability to go ahead and take a shvuah, to swear that he was not paid, and then to go ahead and receive payment, which of course we discussed the unique aspect of that whereas normally again it would have been the balabais, it would have been the employer who would have been empowered to go ahead and take a shvuah and then go ahead and determine the fate of the payment. In this case over here, Chazal reversed it, put the shvuah in the hands of the employee and essentially allowed him to collect by dint of his shvuah. Chazal did this in order to go ahead and give the employee some level of security in his ability to collect his wages. So the Gemara says part of the logic for that is not that we're concerned that the balabayis, that the employer is lying, but rather the fact that the employer may be preoccupied with dealing with the needs of other employees, may think that he paid, this we'll call him Ruvain, that he paid Ruvain, when in fact that he didn't. The Gemara says, well, one second, Ihachi afilu katzatz nami. If that's the case, that we are concerned, then maybe the balabayis is just confused. Right? The balabayis is just confused. And he thinks that he paid Ruvain when in fact that he didn't. So even if they have a disagreement about the amount of the wage, the employee should be believed. The Gemara says, because we should say then maybe just the employer just got confused. To which the Gemara says, Alama Tanya, why does it say, Uman Omer Shtaim Katzatzli? An interesting case over here. Let's say the Uman, right, the employee says, you agreed to pay me, $200 a day. Vala Omer Lo Katzatzli Lecha Ella Achas. And what happens? And the employer says, I only agreed to pay you $100 a day. What's talacha? Hamotzi Mechavera Alav Haraya. Ultimately, again, the burden of proof rests upon the employee. So we'll say, so again, based on what we said before, that halacha l'maisa, we should be concerned that the balabayis is just confused because he's dealing with so much stuff. When there is a dispute about the amount of the wage, we should side with the employee in this case as well. To which the Gemara says, no. Ketzitza vade mitkar dekirele inshi. No. If there's one thing that the employer is absolutely crystal clear on, it's what? How much he agreed to pay his worker. In other words, he may be fussy about the details, did I pay, did I not pay, but he absolutely has clarity in terms of the amount that he negotiated. Ihachi afilo avars manonami. If that's the case, then I don't understand. Then why not say, then you can remember also, the ability for the employee to go ahead and swear that he has not been paid, and we saw this already again in the Mishnah, is only if he swears in the, what we'll call the window of payment. The window of payment, right? The time ultimately, again, that he should have been paid. What if the employee is vested with this heightened level of credibility, and coupled with the fact that the employer may be fuzzy about the details, why not allow the employee to swear and collect wages even outside of the window, even what we call avars mano? To which the Gemara says, now why does it say avars mano eno nishba ben hotel? That we learned that the halacha is that once the window closes, and as well, remember again, we're going to see this in our next sugya, but what we were assuming was like this. Remember, what we established in the Mishnah was, when someone's working for you, so what's the halacha? you have to pay them, quote unquote, immediately. What's the definition of immediately? Or I should say differently, you're not supposed to delay payment. So what's the definition of not delaying payment? Paying within the window in which the job has been completed. We saw already again, that depends. Are you finishing by day? Are you finishing by night? Are you working for half a day, half a night? But again, the Gemara says, one thing we know is that the ability of the employee to swear and collect wages is only if he does so in that prescribed window. But why? If we assume that the balabayis maybe gets mixed up with information, why not allow the employee to swear even for a prolonged amount of time? Alama Tanan, why does it say, Avras Mano Ein Mishba Ben Hotel? Chazaka Ein Balabayis over Mishum Baltalin. So Rabbi said, this is interesting. We have a chazaka. It's fascinating. What's the chazaka? The chazaka is that the balabayis is not in violation of withholding wages. So therefore, again, if halacha l'maisa, so the owner goes ahead, the employee swears within the window, that's one thing. But outside of the window of payment already, the chazaka is that the balabayis is not in violation of withholding wages. Now I want to point out something interesting. This is not a unique chazaka by Baal Talin. They'll say, what's the general chazaka? The general chazaka is that a person has a cheskes kashrus. The general presumption is that a person is a good and law-abiding, upright individual. That's not chazaka. So therefore, again, the Gemara says, amrit balabayis tar b'polav. But you said before that the balabayis, it's not that he's looking to defraud the employee. Rather, what's happening with the balabayis? He's busy. He might have a whole bunch of workers. So the Gemara says, hani mili mikamei delamatis man chiyuve. That's true before the balabayis becomes obligated in paying his employees. In other words, let's say before the time that he becomes obligated in paying, that's when we're concerned that maybe the balabayis is just, he's in a couple of different directions, and therefore may not be fully cognizant of all the details of all of the money he owes every person. Top of Kuf Yud Gimel. Aval mataz man chiyuve rami anafshe umidkar. But once the time, to go ahead and pay his employees comes about, he absolutely is mindful of the details and remembers who he has to go ahead and pay. And which we'll say the logic behind it is because the balabayis himself doesn't want to be in violation of Baal Talin, Chas v'Shalom, and therefore we assume that when it comes time for payment, he is going to understand what his obligations are. V'chi schir over. So therefore, I will say. So just to pause here for just a second. So therefore, the Gemara is suggesting is as follows: when the employee comes to collect his wages, the halacha vests him with credibility, right? And therefore, again, if the balabayis says, I paid you, and the employee says, I never received wages, if it's within what we call the window of payment, then halacha l'maisa, the employee is believed. He takes an oath, he swears, and he's able to collect payment. What's the logic? The logic is that we're concerned that maybe the balabayis is so busy with a whole bunch of different things that he thinks he paid the employee, but he didn't really pay the employee. Okay. What's interesting is, but once the window closes, and therefore, technically speaking, non-payment would have put the employer in a position of Baal Talin, in that case, things change. Now we say there's a chazaka that the employer would not be in violation of Baal Talin. And therefore, again, at that point, the employee is no longer believed to swear and collect wages. So interesting. So there's this chazaka that the employer would not be in violation of Baal Talin. Says the Gemara, okay, that's fine, but v'chi sachir over mishum Baal Tigzal. So the same that there's a chazaka that the employer is not going to be in violation of Baal Talin, there's another chazaka. What's the other chazaka? That the employee is not a thief. And therefore, again, when the employee claims that he has not been paid and now wants to swear to that effect, so we should say that he's believed. Why? Chazaka, he's not a liar. Chazaka, he's not a thief. To which the Gemara says is fascinating. You're right. Hasam trei chazaki, haka chada chazaka. So I'll say, here's the difference. Ultimately, again, hasam trei chazaki, chazaka echad. Ultimately, again, here, there are two chazakas, and ultimately, again, in this case, there's one chazaka. What does this mean? Here we go. The Gemara says, Gabe balabayis ikatrei chazaki. The balabayis, the employer, has two chazakas working in his favor. Listen to this. So the Gemara says, Chada, the ein balabayis of mishum baltalin. So ultimately, again, so number one is that the chazaka number one is that the balabayis, the employer, is not going to be in violation of baltalin. I will say now, once again, that's not a unique chazak over here. It's just the general chazkas kashrus. And chada, the ein balab, chada de malais over mishum baltalin, v'chada, the ein sachir mashes charo. So I will say this is interesting. There's two chazakas working over here. Number one, that the balabayis is not in violation of baltalin. Number two is that people don't wait to get paid. That, in other words, the chazaka is that if the employee has not been paid, he would have claimed that payment within the initial window and would not have waited until now. Hacha by the employee, chada chazaka. There's one chazaka. What's this one chazaka? That he's not a thief. Okay, so let me read this together because it's actually quite fascinating. So here's what we have. So in general, right, I go ahead and I hire Ruvain. Ruvain is my employee. So let's just keep a simple case. I went ahead and I hired him to work until midday on Thursday. So what's talacha? What's the window for collection of wages? We're hiring for half a day on Thursday. Window for collection of wages? Rest of day Thursday. Rest of the daytime on Thursday. Okay, so now what happens? If Ruvain shows up at 4 o'clock Thursday afternoon saying, hey, you didn't pay me, then we'll say, what's talacha? What's talacha? Let's go through this. What's halacha? Ruvain swears and collects payment. Right? What's the logic of that? The logic of that is that Chazal wanted to empower the employee. Right? This way, again, people feel comfortable hiring themselves out for labor. Right? And ultimately, again, the Chazal and the other. So, and we're concerned that maybe I'm claiming I already paid him, but it could be that I'm just just preoccupied with a whole bunch of other details, and therefore again I'm tarud, and therefore again Chazal vested the employee with the ability to swear and collect. Okay, now what we're being introduced to is, but that ability to swear and collect only applies during the window in which a wage is collectible before baltalin sets in. Let's say again, Ruvain comes to me Thursday night. Now at that point already, by Thursday night, if I had not paid, I, the employer, would be in violation of baltalin. Ruvain comes along, makes the same claim. You didn't pay me. They both say, in this case, what's talacha? I am believed. I, the employer, am believed. Why am I? And I'm claiming I did pay him. Why am I believed? Because again, I have two chazakas. What's chazaka number one? Let's work backwards. Chazaka number one is people in general don't wait to get paid. Right? That's in general, right? People, if people are owed money, they generally will show up at the first available moment. We're talking about workers now, laborers. People will show up at the first available moment to go ahead and get paid. That's chazaka number one. Chazaka number two is that I'm an upstanding citizen. I'm not going to be in violation of baltalin. So therefore, again, I have two chazakas. I, as the employer, have two chazakas working for me. Ruvain has one chazaka working for him, which is he's not a thief. So my two chazakas win out over his one chazaka, and therefore again, Ruvain would not be able to simply take an oath in order to collect wages. Beautiful. That's the whole sugya. Let's go weiter. Im yesh edim shetavo haris nishpa v'notel. Now, if Ruvain has witnesses, right? Im yesh edim shetavu. Now, we'll say now, what this is talking about is as follows. The ability for Ruvain to swear and collect only applies when, we'll call within the window of collectability before baltalin sets in. However, the Mishnah said is, if there are witnesses that Ruvain claimed his wage during the window, then halacha l'maisa, he can go ahead and potentially even swear even later on. So just to illustrate this back with our case, I hired Ruvain to work with me for half a day Thursday. So now, again, he shows up Thursday night. He shows up Thursday to collect his wages. So now, based on what we learned before, what's the halacha? And he's ready to swear that he didn't get paid. What's the halacha? Thursday night, what's the halacha? Not believed, right? Why? He can't swear. I have two chazakas, he has one chazaka. Now Ruvain brings witnesses and says, no, come on, Silber, you remember, I was here 4 o'clock on Thursday to claim my wage. I was already here earlier. Okay, so if you have witnesses that say you came during the window of collectability, then that extends your window for taking a shvuah and collecting your wages. Beautiful. Says the Gemara. What do you mean if he has eidim? The Gemara says, "Vaha katavu l'kamon." I will say all of this is happening in a beis din. In other words, it makes it sound like Reuben is introducing new testimony. Remember again, this whole case, everything over here is happening within a beis din. Because remember, whenever you have a shvuah, we're talking about a beis din. To which the Gemara says, "Amar Be'asi shetavo bizmano." Ultimately, again, I will say, so we're talking about the fact that the witnesses came along, as we said before, and testify the fact that Reuben, in fact, claimed his wage from me during the window of collectability. I v'dilma labasar hachi para. So I'll say, so maybe there's a possibility. Maybe while it's true that Reuven, so witnesses come along and say that Reuven claimed his wages from me 4:00 on Thursday. That's fine. Maybe I paid him. In other words, bringing witnesses that Reuven claimed his wage at 4:00 on Thursday just proves that he claimed it. It doesn't claim that I didn't pay it. To which the Gemara says, no. Amrabayi shetavo calls mano. Abai is saying, no, actually the witnesses come along and say, so we'll say, let's say for argument's sake, that shkia is 6:00 on Wednesday, so the witnesses come along and say, that Reuven was claiming the wage from Silber at 5:55. 5:55 on Thursday. So in other words, right at the end of the window of collectability, which clearly indicates that Halach l'maisa, I had not paid anything yet. The Gemara says, Uli Olam. So does this mean now that Reuven has the ability to collect his wages forever? So in other words, if Reuven could furnish testimony, if Reuven can bring witnesses that he claimed his wages during the end of the window of collectability. So that means whenever Reuven comes, he could collect his wages 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, a year later. That works. He could take a shvuah and he could collect his wages. To which the Gemara says no. To which the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Bar Okva Keneged Osa Hayom Shel Tviyah. Rather, I will say what it means is actually quite interesting. It means that Halach l'maisa, it extends the window by one extra day. By one extra day. So for example, if let's say again, Halach l'maisa, I hired Reuven, so let's just put this all together. And now this really forms a beautiful, cohesive picture. I hired Reuven to work half a day on Thursday. So let's go through all of this, right? So now I owe Reuven money, right? When am I obligated to pay Reuven by? When am I obligated to pay him by? Thursday night, right? Remember again, he's a schir shos. He's a half a day worker. I have to pay him by Thursday night. That's the halacha. Now again, Reuven comes along. So let's go through this, right? So scenario one, Reuven comes along on Thursday afternoon. He says, Silber, you didn't pay me. I say, yes, I did. What's the halacha? Reuven swears and collects his wage. Easy. Now again, I'll say now, case number two. If Reuven comes Thursday night to collect his wage, claiming he never paid me, then what's the halacha? Reuven is not believed to swear, and obviously in all these cases, I'm claiming I did pay him. Right? So Reuven is not believed. Why? I have two chazakas, right? Number one, I'm not in violation of Talmud. Number two, people don't wait to get paid, and Reuven has only one chazaka, that he's not a thief. So my two chazakas were not against Reuven's chazaka. Scenario number three. On Thursday night, when Reuven comes to collect his wages, he brings witnesses that he claimed the wage from me on Thursday afternoon. Okay? So beautiful. What does that do? So now I'll say, now since he did claim during the window, and he brings testimony to that extends his ability to collect with a shvuah. How far or how long does it extend his ability to collect with a shvuah? Through Friday. He gets one extra day. So in other words, so therefore again he gets one extra day through Friday to claim his wage with a shvuah. Now I want to point out. So what happens? Let's say after Friday. What happens after Friday? So remember again, after Friday, Reuven doesn't lose the right to make a claim. What does Reuven lose the right to do? Reuven loses the right to collect with a shvuah. See the whole chap over here, the employee empowerment that Chazal are doing over here is that Chazal is saying, employee, we're giving you the ability to swear and collect. So again, that really only applies during the window of collection. If you have edus, then it could extend for one more day. After that, you could still go ahead and try to claim your wage. You could still try. But again, you're going to have to go ahead and bring testimony, bring edus to support your claim. Beautiful. All right, Rabbi say, so now the Mishnah, totally new topic. Says the Mishnah, Hamal ves chavera. So we'll say the really interesting sugi over here, speaking about the taking of collateral. and when and how one is permitted to take collateral. I'm lending Ruvain $10,000. So we'll say, so now watch this. Hamal ves chavero. I lent my friend money. Now Rashi sets up the Mishnah as a very interesting case. You take a look at the first Rashi in the Mishnah. Hamal ves chavero v'yegia zman v'lo paralo. So here's the way Rashi sets this up. I lent Ruvain $10,000, right? So let's assume right now that the money is due on the 14th of Sivan. On the 14th of Sivan. So now what happens? So now 14th of Sivan comes and Ruvain doesn't pay me back. So we'll say, so now the way Rashi is setting this up over here is I am looking to seize collateral as literally a form of repayment. Now, I'm more than happy to go ahead and allow Ruvain to give me cash. But because he's not paying me back, I feel like I need an item of value to now secure the debt. So Rashi says, I want to point out, this is not a typical case of collateral, right? What's a typical case of collateral, right? At the beginning of the loan, right? I'm lending Ruvain money now for the first time. Say, Ruvain, give me an object of value. Let me hold on to something. So this is, I want to take collateral now. The debt is due. It doesn't we're going to see the halachos that we're learning pertaining to collateral. It doesn't really matter which way you're setting up the case. It's just interesting that this is how Rashi is setting it up. Okay, so halacha number one. You will say you can't go ahead and seize collateral on your own. Collateral could only be seized in the context of Beis Din. Rashi says, so again, if you want to take collateral, taking of collateral is a legal process and can only be done in Beis Din itself. Furthermore, you can never enter into someone's house to go ahead and take collateral. Suppose that there's a big biblical no-no, right? So again, halacha number one is collateral. Seizing of collateral is a legal process. Because of that, needs to be done in Beis Din. So halacha number two is a lender can never enter into the debtor's home to seize property as collateral. Shayna Eric, because the pasuk says, "Bachutz tamod." Pasuk says, "Stand outside." The rest of the pasuk is. Bachutz tamod va'isha she'ata no shebo yotzi elecha sa'avot hachutza. Stand outside, and the borrower will bring you the collateral. Okay. So now watch this. So let's assume for a moment, right? I lent Ruvain $1,000. So now Ruvain has two pieces of collateral. One is a plow, and one is a pair of pajamas. Right? Pair of pajamas. The combined value of the pajamas and the plow, like cashmere pajamas, right? So the combined value of the pajamas and the plow is $1,000. Okay. Now what's the chilik between the plow and pajamas? Plow is used by day, pajamas used by night. Okay, so now watch this. So Ruvain has two items, and again, a sum total of both items, right, represents the value of my debt. So what's the halacha? So notel echad umaniach echad. So the halacha is you take one and you leave one. In other words, what the Mishnah is introducing me to is the following halacha: that when I have collateral, if the collateralized item is something that the borrower needs, then you have to give it back. The lender, have to give it back to him at the time of his need. So therefore, again, the Gemara says, literally, again, you take one and you leave one. Right, so the example of it is not pajamas, it's a mattress or a pillow. Right, so what do? I could go ahead and I have to give him back the pillow at night and take the plow by day. So the collateralized items, so in other words, I have a right to take both of them, but I always have to make sure that the borrower has the one that he needs when he needs to use it. So I have to make sure to give him back the plow by day, and ultimately, again, the pillow at night. V'im meis. So what happens now is, so we'll say, so imagine the following scenario. Right? So I lent Ruvain $1,000, I have the collateralized property, and now Ruvain dies. Ema machsa li yarshav. I have no obligation to go ahead and return the collateralized property to the inheritors. So I can keep the collateralized property in satisfaction of the debt. Rabbi Shmuel Silber says, "Afli atzmo ina machzer ela ad shloshim yom." I said, this is a fascinating halacha. Rabbi Shmuel Silber says, the truth is, when you seize collateral, after 30 days, you don't even have to give it back to the borrower himself, even if he's alive. We'll explain what this means. As the Gemara says, only within the first 30 days you're obligated to give back the collateral. After that, mochron bebezdin. From 30 days and on, the lender is allowed to go ahead and keep the collateral, and he could sell it under the purview of Beis Din. Okay, we'll see exactly what Rabbi Shmuel Silber is coming to say in just a little bit. It says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel. So we'll say, so now here's what we have from the Mishnah, right? Essentially 3 halachas. Halacha number one is collateral could only be seized under the guidance or supervision of Beis Din. Halacha number 2, you can never, lender can never enter into borrower's home in order to seize collateral. Halacha number 3, if you seize collateralized property and the borrower needs that property by day or by night, it is my obligation as the lender to make sure that he has use of it when he needs it. Rabbi Shmuel Silber was, okay, so halacha number 4 is if you have collateralized property and the borrower dies, you need not return it back to the heirs. And halacha number 5 will be Rabbi Shmuel Silber, which we'll leave on the side. 5 says, Amar Shmuel, Shliach Beis Din, me'asech nesuchi in, avamashkuni lo. So we'll say, now we come to an interesting question over here. So we'll say, so let's say again, it's not the lender himself who's seizing collateral, rather, it's the Shliach Beis Din. It's an agent of Beis Din who is seizing the collateral. So Shmuel says like this, even a Shliach of Beis Din never has the right to enter into the home of the borrower. Right? Now, interesting, if you look at Rashi, Shliach Beis Din menaschin asuche, afu eno rashay likanis lebeso ulamashkino ela roa b'shuk umenatek, davar she'oches biyado. B'mashkri mashno b'soch habai. So I'll say, this is very interesting. So Shmuel says like this. He says, Shliach Beis Din. What does Shliach Beis Din have the right to do? Right? Agent of the court has the ability to seize collateral. Now, what does that mean? So let's say, again, I will say, I lent Reuven $1,000. Reuven is not paying me back. So I go to Beis Din. Shliach, right? Beis Din appoints a shaliach to go ahead and deal with this. Shliach sees Reuven walking around the shuk with a nice watch. He can go ahead and take the watch from Reuven in the shuk, in the marketplace. What can't he do? What can't Shliach Beis Din do? Aval mashkuni lo. He can't walk into Reuven's home and seize collateral. So according to Shmuel, whereas I, the lender, can't seize any collateral outside of Beis Din, right? But Shliach Beis Din can seize collateral in the marketplace, but even the Shliach Beis Din can't enter into the home of the borrower. No one is allowed to enter into the home of the borrower to seize property, seize collateral, even a Shliach Beis Din. Okay? So the Gemara says, but we learned so we'll say, yeah, but look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, if I lend Reuven money and I want collateral, I can only seize collateral in Beis Din. Michlal de bebeis din memashkinon. So we'll say, ultimately, again, it sounds like that Beis Din does have the ability to go ahead and enter into the property. No. Shmuel says, here's what it means. It means is, I, the lender, am not allowed to seize anything from the borrower in the marketplace or elsewhere, except under the guidance of Beis Din, right? But Beis Din had, right? So if Beis Din appoints the shaliach, so what is Beis Din allowed to do? Beis Din could seize collateral from Reuven in the marketplace. That they could do. So they see Reuven walking around. He's not paying me back. They could seize. What can't Beis Din do? Beis Din can't enter into someone's home. No one is ever allowed to enter into the home of the borrower. So Haganayim Rabbi said, this seems to be clear. Diktani Seifa lo yikanis lebeis olital mashkono. Right? Because again, remember, what did the end of the Mishnah say? And the Mishnah says is, I can't walk in, right? I can't walk into the borrower's home to seize collateral. So the Gemara says, money. Who can't walk in? If we're talking about the lender, so Rabbi say, Mereisha Shmamina. So also remember again, obviously the lender can't walk in. How do I know the lender can't walk into the borrower's home to seize collateral? Rabbi say, because what did the Mishnah say? What did the Mishnah say? The lender is never allowed to seize collateral. He doesn't have the right to just on his own seize collateral. The only way for him to get collateral is obviously through Beis Din. So if he can't seize any type of collateral on his own, certainly he can't enter into the borrower's home. The Gemara says, Ella lav shliach Beis Din. Rather, again, the Mishnah must be teaching me that even the Shliach Beis Din is not allowed to enter into the home of the borrower in order to seize collateral. Somebody says, no, that's not a good raya. Imishum ha, halo iria. Hachikam, that's what it means to say. Hamaves chaver lo yimashkinen ala bebeis din. If I lend money to Reuven, I can only seize collateral in Beis Din. Mechlal de bebeis din memashkinon. And I will say, ultimately, again, it sounds like, but Beis Din does have the ability even to go into someone's property to seize collateral. Ubal chov afilu nachuse nami lo. Shelo Yikanis Lebeso Lita Mashkono. And I will say, could it very well be, so the Gemara is just suggesting that maybe there's an alternate reading. Maybe the alternate reading is, Beis Din is allowed to go into someone's home to seize collateral. I, the lender, am not even allowed to seize collateral in the marketplace. Why? Lest I come to enter into the borrower's home. So we'll say, so here's what we have. Essentially, we have this statement of Shmuel, right? Let's go with what everybody agrees with. What does everybody agree with? I, as the lender, don't have the ability to seize collateral on my own. That's what everybody is agreeing with. And that's obviously true even in the marketplace. Certainly, there's Isser Daraisa for me as the lender to enter into the borrower's home in order to seize collateral. Shmuel comes along and says, by the way, even Beis Din can't enter into someone's home to seize collateral. This is Shmuel's novel idea. So what can Beis Din do? Beis Din can seize collateral from the borrower in the marketplace, right? Seize him in the street. But even the Shliach Beis Din can't enter into borrower's home in order to seize collateral. All right, so we'll say that's our major point that we're trying to prove or disprove over here. So Masav, let's go. Masav Yosef. Lo yachbol rechayim v'rechev. So we'll say it's actually really interesting brisa. So I'll say, so Rav Yosef says like this. So you are not allowed to, Rav say, Rechaim v'rechev are the upper stone and the lower stone, the big stone and the small stone of the mill, right? So you can't go ahead and take someone's millstones as collateral, right? We'll say, why not? Why not? Because doing so is depriving them of a livelihood. This is what we're going to talk about. You can't, in other words, we'll say, it's interesting. On one hand, as a lender, I am entitled to repayment. But it's so interesting how halakha is, right? They would think that, like, if somebody borrows money, it's their obligation to repay you, right? And no matter how they have to do that, then they should have to do it. And I'm entitled to get my money, and no matter how I do it, I should be able to do it. And it's fascinating how the halacha says, no, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You can't seize his millstones because that's how he makes a parnasa. So listen to this. Ha dvarim achirim chaval. Lo yachbol rechayim v'rechav. Ha dvarim achirim. So the Gemara says, chaval, but other things ultimately, again, you are allowed to take. Okay, so you can't take someone's items from which they make a parnas. Other things you can. Similarly, lo sachbal bagad almana, you can't go ahead and take as collateral the garment of a widow. So the Gemara says, hashalachir and tachbal, but you can't take other people's garments. Okay, so the Gemara says, man, so who's taking? Who's seizing collateral in these cases? Inema balchov haksiv lo savo albeso lavot avoto. So we'll say, who's seizing the collateral? I will say now, bepashtos, if you're seizing someone's garment, that's from within their home. He's seizing someone's millstone, that's within their home as well. So who's going in to get these items, right? If you're talking about the balabayas, the lender, so the lender is not allowed to enter into the borrower's home. Elalav shliach Beis Din. Rather, I was also talking about who the shliach Beis Din. What do you see from here? That whereas the lender himself is not permitted to enter into the borrower's home to seize collateral, shliach Beis Din is allowed to go. Contradiction to Shmuel, to which the Gemara says, no, Teri Gemara Rephael Yechiel Nachman Kamei Rav Yosef, Amid Rephael Rav Yosef, Kamei Rav Yosef, Leolam Bebalchov, Vela'avar Alav B'Shnei Lavin. Wow, they will say, no, we're actually talking about the Balchov, and actually what the Brisa is coming to teach us is that halacha l'maisa, if the lender himself does enter into the home of the borrower to go ahead and seize property, then what's the halacha? He's in violation of two prohibitions. Two prohibitions, again, depending on what he's going at and taking, either lo yachbol rechayim or lo sachbol beged almana. So ultimately, again, he'll be in violation, of bachutz tamod and lo yachbol or lo sachbol. Fine. So Tashma. So we'll say still Shmuel seems to be upheld. So let's go back. Tashma masha shenem bachutz tamod. Eini yodea sha'ish asher atanoshe bo yotzi. So we'll say, now here's what's interesting. The pasuk that talks about the prohibition of a lender to enter into the borrower's home phrases it in two ways. It says, stand outside, talking to the lender, stand outside of the borrower's home, and the borrower, va'ish asher atanosha bo yotzi elecha sa'avot. And the person you're lending to, the borrower, will bring out the item to you. Never say. The Gemara essentially says it's redundant. Once you're telling the lender to stand outside, right? Stand outside of the borrower's home. So it's understood what's going to happen over here. What's going to happen? The borrower will bring you the collateral. Why do you have to say both? In other words, just say bachutz tamod, lender, stand outside. I understand what the rest of the process is. To which the Gemara says, Elamat tam lo va'ish. So I'll say, why does it say va'ish? Why does it say the man to whom you have lent money? What does that come to teach me? The rabbos shliach Beis Din. ultimately to teach me, ish comes to include the agent of the Beis Din. Now, what does that mean? My lav shliach Beis Din kelova. So we'll say maybe he's coming to teach me that the shliach Beis Din is treated just like the borrower. What does that mean? The same way that the borrower has the right to go into his home and retrieve an item, so too shliach Beis Din has the right to go into the borrower's home and retrieve an item. So we'll say this is a contradiction to Shmuel. Shmuel said the shliach Beis Din is not allowed to go into the borrower's home, and here the Gemara suggests over here that va'ish ultimately comes to include that a shliach Beis Din is allowed to go into the borrower's home. But we'll say Kuf Yud Gimel Beis 113b, lo shliach Beis Din kemalva. Not true. The Gemara says not true. The drush is incorrect. Shliach Beis Din, the agent of the Beis Din, is just like the lender, meaning just like the lender doesn't have the right to go into the borrower's home, so too shliach Beis Din doesn't have the right to go into the borrower's home as well. Tashma, so let's analyze a bit more. We'll say 113b, first line on top. Tashma. Im chaval tachbol samas reyacha. So the pasuk says, if you go ahead and you take the garment of your friend, advo hashemesh tishivenu lo. Shabbos said, this is talking about again. I lent Reuven $1,000. I have his pajamas. I took as collateral his pajamas. So what's the halacha? The halacha is that I have to give him back his pajamas before nightfall. Okay. So both say the Torah is talking about shliach Beis Din. Shliach Beis Din. Take a look at Rashi. Not yet. Shliach Beis Din akasav medaber. At omer b'shliach Beis Din akasav medaber. O eino ela b'balchov. So you're telling me that it's talking about the shliach Beis Din. Maybe he's talking about the lender himself. Kishu Omer lo sava al beiso la'avot avoto. When the pasuk says you may not go into his home to seize collateral, hare balchov Omer. That's talking about the balchov. That's talking about the lender. So the Gemara says ha ma'ani makayim chaval takbal samas v'yachal. So who is the pasuk talking about when it says if you have your friend's garment as collateral, give it back before nightfall. B'shliach hak Beis Din akasav medaber. Torah is talking about the shliach Beis Din. So what do you see from this exchange over here? From this exchange over here, it seems to be that a shliach Beis Din is permitted to go into the home of the borrower to seize collateral. So I will say, bottom line is, Shmuel makes a statement, right? Shmuel's statement is, the same way that the lender can't enter into the borrower's home to seize collateral, shliach Beis Din can't enter into borrower's home as well. That's Shmuel's statement. Now, so what's the maila? What is the benefit that a shliach Beis Din has that a stam lender doesn't have? What's the benefit? Shliach Beis Din does have the ability to seize collateral from the borrower in the marketplace, whereas the lender himself can never seize collateral outside of the purview of Beis Din. Shabbos say, but the problem is, is Shmuel correct or incorrect? So here we just seem to have competing inferences. To which the Gemara says, finally, you're right. It's not you. It's not right. It's not us. It's the Gemara Tanaihi. This whole thing is a machlokes tanoim. Whether or not the shliach Beis Din is permitted to enter into the home of the borrower in order to seize collateral is a machlokes tanoim. Disanyo shliach Beis Din shebalam ashkeno. So we'll say if a shliach Beis Din comes. So again, I'll say I lent Reuven $1,000. Reuven is not paying me back. So now I want to seize collateral. I go to Beis Din. Beis Din appoints a shaliach to help out with this. So shliach Beis Din that came to seize collateral, lo yikanis lebeiso lemashkono, ela omid bachutz v'ala motzi lo mashkon shene'emar bachutz ta'amod v'ha'ish. Okay, here it is. I will say, Bryson number one. Shliach Beis Din is coming to collect collateral. What's the halacha? He knocks on Reuven's door, and what does he do? Waits outside for Reuven to bring out the collateral, and that's it. Shliach Beis Din has the same halacha as me, the lender. No one enters into the home of the borrower to retrieve collateral. Another brayso, balchov shebalam ashkeno. Right? If a balchov comes along, I will say now. In this case over here, this is the balchov. Right? I'm coming. I the lender, I'm coming along to go ahead and receive collateral. Lo yikanis lebeis lemashkeno. I cannot enter into the house of Reuven to go and retrieve collateral. Ela omid bachutz, but ultimately again I stand outside. V'halo nichnas umotzi lo mashkono, and I wait for Reuven to bring me out the collateral. Shene'emar bachutz ta'amot u'shliach Beis Din sheba lemashkeno harizeh nichnas lebeis lemashkeno. But a shliach Beis Din comes along and sees his collateral. What does he do? He walks right in. So we'll say here it is. Machlokes tanoim. So we'll say again, let's always important to focus on what we agree on. Right? So what do we agree on? I, as the lender, never have the ability to seize collateral outside of Beis Din. That's Aleph, number one. Number two, I, as the lender, never have the right to go into the home of the borrower to seize collateral. What's the machlokes? A shliach Beis Din. The shliach Beis Din have the right to go into the borrower's home to seize collateral. So you're going to say, machlokes. And Shmuel clearly saying that the halacha is he does not have that right. Incredible. Okay, so the Gemara go like this. So we'll say now what we're going to go back is, if you remember again, now this is the rest of this brisa, right? This is a much longer brisa that we're going to talk about and now dissect. Really fascinating. Now we'll say in general, when seizing collateral, you can't seize for collateral things that people use for their livelihood. Ochal nefesh means for their sustenance. So remember again, this goes back to what we saw before. That, for example, I can't seize Reuven's, millstones. So I can't seize things that he uses for his own sustenance. So we'll say not only that. Here's what's fascinating: when seizing collateral, you do have to make sure that you leave behind enough property that that the borrower has enough to maintain a normative lifestyle. So, for example, the nose mita umita matzala ashir. So let's say, for example, let's say Reuven is wealthy. So I have to make sure that no matter what I seize, I have to make sure that leave behind a mita, a bed, and another bed that has like a felt cover. Okay, why two beds? We'll see, right? Or mita umita mapas liani. Or if Reuven's poor, I have to leave for him a bed and another bed with a felt cover. With a felt cover. So the Gemara says, fine. So the Gemara says, Mita umita, all right, umafis la'ani. Aval lo le'ishto, v'lo le'banav, u'bnosav, but I am not obligated to make sure that I leave behind the bed for Reuven's wife or for Reuven's kids, his sons or his daughters. So in other words, I am obligated, I'm saying that it's interesting again, both for the poor man and for the rich man. I'm obligated to make sure that Reuven has two beds, right? Each one with their own cover, depending on a rich cover or a poor cover, right? But I'm not obligated to make sure that his kids or his spouse have a bed. Okay, so we'll see all of this. Gemara says, Gemara says, it's actually very interesting. Let's talk about this just for a second. Rashi says, we'll just tell you this. I'm just going to say this outside because of time. I'll say there's something called an erech vow, right? What does an erech vow mean? Erech vow says a person says, Erech yalai, I hereby go ahead and pledge my value to the Beis HaMikdash. I will say the Torah creates objective categories, right? The male between the ages of 20 and 60 is X, above 60 is Y. So a woman, a child, all these different things. So let's say it turns out that we go ahead and assess my value, and then what occurs? What occurs is that halacha l'maisa, I go ahead and, or let's say the devour can't afford to pay his erech. So what's the halacha? So the Beis HaMikdash assesses him how much he's able to go ahead and pay. So the Gemara says the same way that we assess a balchov, in other words, that we identify how much the balchov is able to go ahead and what he needs. In other words, as much as the lender is permitted to go ahead and seize collateral, but we assess what the borrower should have remain with him. We also assess how much someone could pay for an erech vow, to which the Gemara says, no, klapi lai, just the opposite. Iker sideh be'erechen ksiv. I will say, again, the concept of valuating someone and assessing how much they're really able to afford, that concept comes from Erechin, and now we're going to apply it ultimately over here again by collateral. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Rather, we'll say the right way to read it is the same way that when someone can't afford to pay their Erech vow, we assess how much they can afford. So too, when someone can't afford to pay their debt, and now we have to seize collateral, we assess how much collateral could they afford to have seized, right? And what do they need ultimately again in order to be able to function? Fine. So Mar goes back there. Amar no say mita umita, right? Mita umita matzla asher. Umita umatza umafats la'ani. So I'll say, so both for the ani and the usher, we provide for them two beds, right? One bed and then another bed with a cover. Again, a more expensive cover for the usher, a less expensive cover for the ani. So the Gemara says, Laman, who's the second bed for? Why do you need two beds? So the Gemara says, Laman, if one bed is for Reuven and the other bed is for family members, ha'amrit lo avalo le'ishto lebanav u'bnosav. So we'll say first white line. We just said before that what? That halacha l'maisa, you only have to leave behind the bed for Reuven, but there's no obligation to leave a bed behind for family members. Ela idi ve'idli didei. Wow. Rather, we'll say again, both beds are for Reuven. Both beds are for Reuven. Why does Reuven need two beds? Tarti lamali, chada de'achil ala, v'chada de'zag ala. One bed is for eating, and one bed is for sleeping. Right? The idea was, I remember again, they used to eat reclining. So you'd have an eating bed and a sleeping bed. Why can't you go ahead and use both beds? Right? Use one bed for both things. So I will say, this is great. Kiddush Shmuel, the Amar Shmuel, Kol mili yadana asusayu, lebar mahani tla. Shmuel said, apparently Shmuel was like a physician, or versed in medicine. Right? So I will say, so Lamais again, Shmuel said, there are three things. I can pretty much find the cure for anything. Three things, three elements that I can't cure. Number one, man da'achil ahina marira aliba rekana. Someone who eats a bitter date on an empty stomach, apparently not good. Right? Man da'asir misna dekisna retiva achartse. Someone who ties a wet wool rope around his hips. So apparently, again, this makes a person ill as well. And lastly, uman da'achil nama v'lo maski arba garmidi. Someone who eats bread, who eats food, it doesn't walk dalit amis before going to sleep. So apparently, you know, say eating right before you go to bed without any physical activity is unhealthy. So now I will say, now watch this. Now what's the chap over here? Therefore, I will say, so how do you obviate this concern? Have two beds. Because if you have two beds, what is that by definition? And make sure there's spaced at least dalit amis apart. So what does that do? So what does that do? That ensures that between eating and going to sleep, you're going to go ahead and walk at least dalit amis. I would say, it sounds like over here also it's fascinating that even from like a hashkafic perspective, it can't be that the last thing a person does before they go to sleep is eat. Like, in other words, it's not right. Like hashkafically, it's not right that the way you close out your day is to go ahead and nourish your guf. That can't be the way a yid ends his day. How does a yid have to end his day? It doesn't have to be with Torah. How do you have to move your day? How do you have to end your day? Movement. Because what is the life of a yid all about? It's all about movement. It's all about getting from point A to point B. It's all about advancing my life. It's all about not staying in place. So the worst thing you could possibly do is end the day filling your stomach. Because that ends the day with total gashmius. The day has to be ended, has to be concluded at least with dalit amis of movement. Tani Tana Kari Rav Nachman. We'll have to stop over here for today. Sorry for the little bit of late. I got back late last night, so just needed a few extra minutes this morning. Sorry. All right, but tomorrow is a shorter daf, and Shabbos is even shorter, and it just gets shorter and shorter every day. We have no for the foreseeable future. We're fine. Such a schus in the city together. Incredible.